Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely wild, incredibly provocative thesis about the future of global power and digital sovereignty. We're talking about the cracking foundations of the traditional nation-state. And the craziest part, the core of these predictions was written decades ago, yet we are literally watching the mechanics of this argument play out right now, in real time, right on our screens and in our bank accounts. Whether you buy into these conclusions or not, the underlying forces driving this shift are absolutely fascinating, and they directly impact how we understand the trajectory of our modern world. Let's get into it.
So to kick things off, let's ask a pretty fundamental question. Is the internet making traditional borders obsolete? Think about your own digital life for a second. Let's say you work a remote job for a company based in one country. You're communicating via servers located in a second country, and you're getting paid in a digital currency stored on a decentralized ledger. Where exactly does that economic activity exist? For centuries, right, our political and our economic lives were locked into hard lines drawn on a physical map. But what happens to the power of those borders when the tools we use to communicate, work, and trade entirely bypass physical geography? Are we actually witnessing the end of the territorial monopoly?
Well, to answer that, we're analyzing the frameworks originally presented in the 1997 book, The Sovereign Individual, along with some modern tech white papers and network research. Collectively, these sources argue that the information age is actively dismantling the nation-state's geographic monopoly. They propose this profound historical parallel that I just love. It goes like this. Just as the invention of gunpowder fundamentally destroyed the localized, castle-based power structures of feudalism, modern cryptography and the internet are destroying the centralized, vertical power structures of the industrial welfare state. That is a massive comparison. Gunpowder rendered stone walls useless, right? The argument here is that the internet is rendering geographic borders economically useless.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The shift in megapolitics. 2. Fall of geographic monopolies. 3. The cyberspace frontier. 4. The network state emerges. And 5. The sovereign individual.
All right, moving right into Section 1, the shift in megapolitics.
We really need to understand these overarching forces that our sources claim basically dictate the rise and fall of human governments. We usually think of political change as something driven by, say, elections, charismatic leaders, or shifting ideologies. But the framework here points to a much deeper, much more mechanical layer of reality called megapolitics. To break this down simply, imagine the invention of the tractor. Before the tractor, human society had to be organized around massive amounts of manual agricultural labor just to survive. The technology literally dictated the social structure. Once the tractor made farming exponentially more efficient, the social structure had to change with it, leading to massive urbanization and the Industrial Revolution. According to our sources, megapolitics is the study of these exact boundaries within which power is exercised. The core argument? The modern industrial nation-state was perfectly adapted to the megapolitical conditions of the 19th and 20th centuries. But the information age requires entirely new mechanisms because the underlying physics of how we create, transport, and store value have completely shifted.
Which brings us to Section 2, the fall of geographic monopolies.
Think about the industrial age. Wealth was overwhelmingly physical. It was a sprawling steel mill, a transcontinental railroad, a massive automotive factory. And here's the catch. You couldn't exactly pack up a steel mill in your suitcase and move across the border if the local government suddenly decided to double your taxes. That physical permanence gave the state incredible, vertical, top-down leverage to basically extract wealth from a captive audience. Historically, governments absolutely relied on this specific advantage, the sheer inability of assets to move easily, to maintain their authority and their tax bases. But in the information age, wealth has become digital. It's software code, it's global user data, it's algorithms, and decentralized finance. These modern assets can move across the globe at the literal speed of light, entirely escaping that traditional geographic trap.
And to really grasp exactly how this shift became physically possible, you have to look at the plunging costs of communication. The text highlights a staggering data point. The cost of a transatlantic phone call plummeted over 99%. We're talking going from $650 for a 3-minute call back in 1946 down to just 91 cents decades later. Honestly, if you're paying $650 for a phone call today, it had better come with a time machine. Today, data transmission is practically free. This immense, purely mathematical reduction in telecommunication costs completely erased the necessity for geographic proximity. You no longer need to physically be in New York to do massive amounts of business in New York. The nation-state's geographic monopoly wasn't shattered by some conquering army. It was shattered by the sheer, undeniable cheapness of moving information.
Let's jump into Section 3, the cyberspace frontier.
With geographic proximity out of the picture as a barrier, we have to ask, if physical borders don't matter for digital assets, where exactly do these transactions actually live? The sources argue they are rapidly migrating to cyberspace. Historian Frederick C. Lane provides a fascinating historical parallel here. Throughout history, merchants naturally migrated to frontiers and out to the high seas. Why? Simply because out on the open ocean, no single governing body held a monopoly on violence. That meant merchants could avoid the state's top-down leverage to extort them as captive subjects. Well, cyberspace functions the exact same way. It's like this vast digital ether where no single physical government can easily enforce predatory taxation or arbitrarily slap rules on transactions happening entirely outside their physical jurisdiction.
The authors actually outline 3 distinct mechanical steps for the evolution of this cyber economy. First up, the internet was just a simple information medium. Think of the early 90s internet. Those basic, static web pages, it was essentially just an exotic digital catalog. Step 2, we saw the rise of remote services. Think early Web 2 e-commerce or long-distance accounting. You were buying things online, sure, but everything still functions strictly within old national currencies and traditional tax systems. The third step, however, is the megapolitical tipping point. True cyber commerce operating entirely outside traditional borders. This is the realm of decentralized finance and cryptography. This is where payment is rendered in borderless digital currency, profits are booked in decentralized protocols, and transactions are securely lodged way beyond the physical reach of any traditional tax collector.
John Perry Barlow framed this perfectly in his writings. Cyberspace is creating a seamless global economic zone that is fundamentally unregulatable by traditional means. Cyberspace is basically the ultimate offshore jurisdiction, shielded by pure mathematics rather than standing armies. Just think about the gravity of that shift for a second. When you use public key encryption to secure a digital asset, it simply doesn't matter how many tanks or fighter jets or aircraft carriers a nation-state possesses. They physically cannot use physical force to break the math required to seize that asset. The entire global balance of power swings away from physical coercion and directly into the hands of cryptographic protection.
Moving on to Section 4, the network state emerges.
So, if vertical nation-states are collapsing because their geographic monopolies are broken, what exactly is rising to take their place? Our sources introduce this concept of the network state, a parallel society built natively on the internet. In this new paradigm, sovereignty totally transforms from a geographic birthright burden into a competitive commercial service. Instead of being born into a top-down jurisdiction with monopoly taxation and essentially no way out, citizens become highly mobile customers. Economists call this tie vote sorting. In plain English, it means people will actively vote with their feet. They'll take their digital wealth and simply opt into whichever digital or physical jurisdictions align with their values and offer the best protection for the lowest cost. Now, this shift isn't just some academic theory. It is being mathematically enforced by a very real, very modern toolkit. You have cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin that allow vast global networks to transact and store value entirely without the state's permission, effectively bypassing centralized inflation and monetary policy completely. Technologies like Starlink user terminals allow global citizens to connect to the internet directly from space, bypassing authoritarian firewalls and domestic telecom monopolies. And then there are unbreakable text streams like command line interfaces and secure smart contracts, which allow people on totally opposite sides of the planet to execute perfect, lossless agreements without ever needing a traditional physical court system to back them up.
It's wild, but we can actually connect this massive political shift directly to the mechanical rigidity of computer processors. There's this concept in computer science called the von Neumann bottleneck, which deals with the physical delay between a computer's memory and its processor. Because of this, computer hardware demands absolute, flawless determinism. Think of a microchip like an ultra-strict orchestra conductor relying on a perfect internal metronome of clocked voltages. There is zero room for variance. And what this means is that the new sovereign digital networks are built on strict deterministic execution. They do not care about human feelings, messy bureaucracy, or subjective political arguments. Smart contracts and decentralized ledgers rely entirely on the unyielding physical grid of logic gates to enforce agreements.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, the sovereign individual. When you take the collapse of geographic monopolies, the rapid migration of wealth to cyberspace, and those deterministic, unbreakable tools of the network state, you arrive at the ultimate outcome, a completely new archetype of human existence. The sovereign individual leverages all of these forces to achieve totally unprecedented autonomy. By using cryptography to protect their wealth and by utilizing extreme digital mobility, they essentially force physical jurisdictions to compete for their economic presence. The individual is no longer a captive asset on a state's treasury balance sheet. And this is exactly why this matters directly to you. In this emerging future, governments might increasingly have to court you,
with tailored tax incentives, better digital infrastructure, and customized private treaties, just to keep your digital capital within their physical borders. The traditional concept of a compliant citizen is being entirely replaced by the concept of a highly valued customer.
As we increasingly align our societal structures, our money, and honestly our very identities with the rigid, borderless determinism of silicon microchips and cryptographic math, we are left with a really profound question. Who is actually driving this megapolitical evolution? Are we actively and consciously choosing to dismantle traditional vertical power to free ourselves? Or is the cold, deterministic nature of the technology itself naturally forcing humanity to reorganize just to suit its efficiency? It's an incredible paradox to ponder as you navigate your own highly digital life. Keep questioning the architecture around you.